Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City is a much closer adaptation that tries as much as possible to be faithful to the games, and it succeeds in that to some extent, but on the other hand it fails at all the other aspects of what makes a movie watchable and engaging. Welcome back everyone to a new review, and in this video we're looking into the latest reboot of Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. After the last parts with Mila Jovovich finally finished, which weren't really that bad, and I would say they became more of a guilty pleasure for me anyway. We were all hoping for a new adaptation that's closer to the games and gives more respect to its lore and especially its characters, because there was little of that in the earlier movies. And now that we were finally getting a new adaptation that's actually centered this time around all the characters that we like, a lot of us were excited to see it and thinking that finally someone is about to give us what we've always wanted. But in the end we get this, and I'll have to call it a slap on the face.
Oh, wow!
Why is it always when a remake or an adaptation is produced, it has to mess up the important parts of its source material? Let's look at the main issues this movie had. But before that, I'll have to remind you that this is a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen this movie yet, you know what to expect. So this movie is based on the first two Resident Evil games, and a little bit on Code Veronica, and that's about the only thing to it. It has all of the familiar characters with no unnecessary additions of new ones like the older version, and some of these characters here fit nicely as their game counterparts, while some others are just way off. The story's changed a little bit regarding Chris and Claire, who are the first characters we see. Instead of being the newcomers to Raccoon City, they are raised there in an orphanage run by William Birkin. I actually didn't mind that change, and it was interesting for the original story, and it could have been built up to a very good plot, but that is not what happened. Robbie Amell and Kaya Scodelario are about the only actors perfectly casted as their characters in this one, being Chris and Claire, as well as Neil McDonough as Dr. Birkin. Most of the others, however, didn't bring out any of their characters as known personalities, especially Leon, and I'll get to him shortly. The funny part in the beginning is how the characters were introduced. It could have been made subtly without having their names fully mentioned for the sake of recognition, and there was obviously a lot of effort put into including every possible reference from the games, which is a good thing. But on the other hand, nothing else was considered in regards to the characters as personalities, sequence of events, and even common sense. The dialogues were forced and none of them seemed casual or genuine. The jokes were corny, dry, and certainly did not help with the storyline at all. And the CGI and even practical effects were terrible and took away a lot from the thrill of the movie. The thing I'm pissed off about the most though is that they completely wiped the floor with Leon's character in this one. He was weak, idiotic, and devoid of any charisma here. For his looks, the guy who played Leon should have been casted as Carlos instead, because he fits that character more. Also, this Leon here couldn't have been further from his game counterpart. And I get that he's playing a rookie cop just like in the game, and he's getting himself up to do his job, so it would be natural that he's stumbling in his decisions and being a little clumsy even. But they just flat out made him a useless idiot and a constant target for random bullying. Like the scene where the police chief was talking to the team about the alarm, and then Leon walks in and asks a question, and the chief just snaps at him.
What the fuck are you doing here, Leon? I didn't mean you moron!
First of all, I don't even know if that was supposed to be a police chief or just a bullying school principal in a comedy sketch. His script, expressions, and attitude were completely off in that scene. And the other thing is that Donald Logue is a great actor, and I liked plenty of his roles like in Blade and Max Payne and a few other films, but his character here was out of everything. Coming back to Leon, all of his scenes were just of him being completely stupid and oblivious to what is going on around him. And that scene with the truck crashing right in front of the police station and the events that followed after is very much an evidence of that. Also, his other scene in the jail downstairs and his interaction with the prisoner and the zombie in the end was ridiculous.
Get your shit together. You're not gonna make it through the night.
I just could not believe how much they butchered his character here. As for the other characters, Jill was okay-ish. She wasn't too close or too far from her game counterpart. Hannah Joan Kamen is a great actress as well, and I would have liked to see more of her as Jill if it wasn't obviously for the stuffed and short story that was full of random events. And Tom Hopper's Wesker was not bad either. I'm not saying every character in the movie needs to be exactly like the games, but I think he was a little too emotional for a character who's known to be completely apathetic and selfish and always puts himself first. But the main issue with this Wesker is that he was less charismatic and didn't really stand out as a memorable villain, and I think that was the main fault for the rest of the characters too. Their personalities appeared generically similar to each other and without any distinguishable aspects to them that can make the audience drawn to them individually and to their journeys in the story. They were all similarly nice, friendly, and on the same level, and none of them really stood out like the original characters in the games did, at the very least. The looks and effects of the human zombies and the dog weren't very convincing either, and I think the only monster that looked kind of okay was the liquor. Also, Birkin's monologue when he was turning into a monster after he injected himself was laughable, and definitely not on the level of Neil McDonough too, because he usually has stronger roles than this. But at least he was a good casting choice choice, as I said in the beginning. His final look in the end, however, was horrendous and seemed cartoonish for a climactic scene like that. And that final scene inside the train was the last straw for me that completely shattered any potentially good thing about this movie, or any possibility to take it seriously. As we see what happens when our characters face the last monstrous form of Birkin, Leon casually walks in with a rocket launcher. Obviously, because that's the final boss, since the movie kept giving us all of those references. And that's when Leon delivers the most badass line in the history of movies.
You ugly fuck!
That moment would have been better actually if he didn't say anything at all. And then he makes the clever decision to shoot the monster with the rocket launcher in a closed train car with everyone inside, and Chris standing right next to the monster, as if that whole explosion from the rocket launcher in that tiny space is only going to harm the monster and no one else.
That doesn't make any goddamn sense.
I would only give this film props for having the closest Resident Evil story we've ever seen, and it brought all of the characters that we know from the games, and while they weren't very similar to their game counterparts when it comes to their personality and presence, they were all there, and they had their screen time at the very least. Even the truck driver from RE2 had his scene copied almost exactly from the game. But the downfall of this is obviously the mashed up convoluted storyline of 2 or even 3 game stories, reduced to about an hour and 45 minutes, with too many characters, references and events shoved into it. I mean, come on, the earlier Resident Evil 2 game had 2 stories of 2 characters trying to survive in the same area, and although both of their stories were interconnected in some parts and even repeated in a few others, the makers of the game managed to extend it to 2 series, with each of them having a compelling plot to play and follow. But here you're trying to put the same 2 characters from that story, in addition to about 4 other characters from a different one, into just an hour and 45 minute story?
You serious?
This movie was disappointing to say the least, and that's why I'm giving it 4 out of 10. 2 for being too bad, and the extra 2 are for bringing the actual Resident Evil references and characters. It did have potential to be a much better experience, however, if only it was handled better. Simply if it was separated into 2 parts, with each part handling a smaller number of characters at a time, instead of cramming them all together, as well as putting more effort into the effects and CGI. But anyway, that's all I have to say about it, and I'd like to know what did y'all think of it, and what aspects did you like or dislike about this movie and its relation to the games. For me, this movie is just too bad to even be considered a guilty pleasure. And in my reaction video to the trailer, I mentioned that I was worried it might turn out like Doom Annihilation. Well, my fears have come true and worse, because I actually enjoyed Doom Annihilation that it became a guilty pleasure itself. And to be fair, I guess because I had high expectations for this one, and that's why I was more disappointed with it. But anyway, what do y'all say? Let me know in the comments below, and I would very much like to read your opinions about it. And until I see y'all in the next video, thank you very much for watching, have a splendid day, and peace out.